Well, welcome to our coaching chat Zoom. We are wrapping up the book, Ditch the Pitch, which I think has been a gold mine when it comes to really understanding how to converse and communicate with people. I'm going to go ahead and if you guys, I'm going to go ahead and make copies of this and make it available for you guys. You can see it has all the tips that we've been talking about for the last several weeks. And I think this is one of those books that you can read, reread, or at least just have this handy, go over it and over it and over it again. Because even though I've been in the business now, 21 years, I'm telling you, I'm learning stuff. And as I try to implement this, I'm learning more, and I'm learning how much I didn't really know. Even though you think you know a lot, you always, it's like every time I pick up a book, I learn some new things. And for that, I'm grateful. So we're going to jump in, and we are going to start with, let me get us all set up here. We're going to start with habit number 5. So let me just warn everybody up front. There's going to be a bit of a quiz at the end. So sharpen your pencils, get your notebooks out, because we're going to see how well everyone's paying attention. And fortunately, I last minute dropped a bomb on Sandy Thompson, and she graciously agreed to be our guinea pig. And then I'm going to ask you guys to jump in at the end, and you'll find out what we're going to do at the end. So, okay, so let's jump in. Habit number 5, focus the conversation on your customer. And we've kind of, this thread's kind of been going through all the habits 1 through 4 so far, but this one really hones in on that, focusing on the conversation itself. So the first tip that they want us to really implement and practice this week and from here on out is make 95% of the conversation about your prospect. And if there are any extroverts on this call with me, that is hard for us extroverts to do. I think introverts have a little bit easier, I know they do, time of really doing exactly that, focusing on that person. But it's key that we all really keep that in mind. So I've got a story to tell, and I don't want to offend anyone, but it's so funny. I've got to actually watch your faces when I tell this story. So the second point, let me get back to that a second. So the second point is pretend. Okay, so when I'm thinking about when we focus on 95% being on that person, I've got to give you an example of what it takes to really focus. So there's a story. My husband years ago was in California, and he went to this training, and in this training, they had to partner up with people. And so everyone kind of quickly partnered up with people. And so Scott said he turned around, and there was a fella next to him that he was like, okay, I don't know this person. And that was the whole idea, was to really get to know this person. So you had to have a conversation, you had to interview. And so Scott said, so he starts talking to this guy, and his name was Stacy. So he and Stacy go back and forth, and they're trying to get to know each other. And the whole gist of this, what I want to say, exercise was to really teach you how to dig deep and really learn who someone is who you've never met before. Then, after you've done all this digging of information, then what you have to do is stand up in front of the class and introduce yourself as this person and tell their story. So as Scott begins to unpack and learn who this person is, he finds out that this person is a trans dresser. And so the more he talked, the more he was like, wow, the more he started sweating, thinking, oh my gosh, And so, but when you hear him, I wish I could do it justice. When you hear him tell the story of him standing up in front of the class, it was amazing how much he had dug out, how much he had learned. It was quite an exercise that stretched him to the fullest. But he said it taught him a lesson of how to really dig deep, ask questions. And although that was totally outside of his comfort zone, what it did was forced him to really hone in on what this person was saying. So today, what I'm going to challenge us to do is I want us to really get to the point that we dig deep, regardless of who we're talking to, and really learn as much as what we possibly can, and then be able to turn around and introduce ourselves as that person. And if I think about that, I'm not so good when it comes to listening to that degree or digging to that degree, but it's something I want to learn how to do. And so when you think about this, make sure 95% of the conversation is about that prospect. Think about that story and how difficult it would have been to dig that kind of information out and then turn around and introduce yourself. So am I talking deep enough with this person to really be able to turn around and introduce myself as that person? So that's point number one. And later on in the book, I'm going to share a technique that the book talked about, is that if you visualize my husband trying to introduce himself as Stacy, maybe that'll help as you're in conversation with someone thinking, can I turn around and introduce myself like that person? The second thing is the 5% you're talking about should be about them. So if 95% of the time I'm listening and picking up from the conversation, the 5% I'm talking about should be about that person. And I guarantee you, if you're talking about that person, they are going to be listening. They're going to be interested and they're going to be engaged in what you're saying. And then the last point under this practice that we're going to do this week is every piece of information about you should somehow be connected to them. So if I'm wanting to weave some Juice Plus information in, or I want to weave in my story, what I want to do is make sure whatever I say is somehow connected to them. So I want you to think about these points, because at the end, we're going to have Sandy Thompson share her story. And what I want to hear back from you guys is some of these points. Could you turn around and introduce yourself as Sandy Thompson? Could you use the 5% you are talking be about Sandy Thompson, yet still communicate the Juice Plus story? And then lastly, can you connect your story to Sandy's story? We're going to see how many quick learners we got on the call today. All right, the second thing it talked about in this focusing the conversation on your customer is obey the one paragraph rule. How many of us have ever been around someone and they just talk, and you're like, gosh, I didn't even get to say anything. You ever been around somebody who talks about their kids and they don't stop and you just want to say, well, I have some pretty good kids too. Could I just say one thing? You know, that's what we don't want to do. And I think anything we're excited about, anything we love, that's just normal out of anyone wanting to do that. But I think if we focus on our mind and envision one paragraph. So first we're envisioning Scott as Stacy, introducing himself as Stacy. Secondly, I want you to visualize a paragraph. And when you talk, think about, okay, not exceeding how much you'd normally say in a paragraph. You don't want to read a big, long paragraph. You need those breaks to think and let it sink in. And then practice number 3, weave your stories together. You know, about a month ago, Letty and I did a it was a conversational health and wealth talk. And I think we're going to go back and try to record it, because I really, once we got into it, I thought, okay, this is good. And as we were talking though, what I realized, have you ever tried to weave your story with someone else's? It's not that easy. And I noticed that when I was going back and forth with Letty, who was a school teacher and was attracted to Juice Plus, and I was trying to talk about as a financial planner and how we came together in this business. And as we talked with that in mind, that we were trying to play off each other's stories, I realized, one, it's not that easy, but I also realized how valuable doing that really is and how connected we were. So think about, how do I weave? So as Sandy Thompson tells her story, think about, how do you weave your story with Sandy Thompson's? Because what we want to do is practice this stuff. Because you know what we're doing and what we're learning in Ditch the Pitch, we're taking our communication skills to a whole nother level. And that's what we want to do. We want to get better and better. And it doesn't matter how long we've been doing this. We want to keep taking our skills to the next level. All right. So the second habit is, don't rush the story. So the 3 practices when it comes to not rushing the story. Number 1, don't load the shotgun. Have you ever, I've even caught myself doing this. The minute someone maybe opens a window that you can talk about Juice Plus, have you ever just started like wham, 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 just firing Juice Plus information? And all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, stop it, Elaine. This is nuts. You know, it's more than they can handle. It's more than they want. Just shut up. I can hear this going on in my head. And that actually was one of the practice sessions we had. And I think it was chapter 3, about doing things like that. And then our mind starts getting distracted because we know we're doing something we shouldn't be doing. So think about, visualize a slingshot. And that way, if we have a tendency to start doing it, that slingshot, that visual slingshot's going to come to our mind. So let the conversation just unfold and develop. That way, it allows you not to talk too much, and allows them to talk, and it becomes a conversation versus just loading up on information on somebody. And then you've heard me say this a million times, but I want to go back to a quote that I learned from my husband. He who asks the questions guides the conversation. He who asks the questions guides the conversation. So if you find yourself, which I found myself doing this many times, is firing off with a slingshot too much information, what the easiest way to stop yourself is to ask a question. Like if in your mind, like, oh my gosh, I'm doing it, I got to stop. Then think of a question. And then what it does is it sends it back to them and allows the conversation to go back to them. And what you've just done is guided the conversation back on track, instead of letting it just totally go off track. All right, practice number 2 on habit 6 is leave things in your pocket. You know, there's nothing better. There's a verse in the Bible that talks about, and Allison, you always know the scripture. There's a verse that talks about your words are like gold or silver when they're, if you can think of it, Allison, please share it. But it has to do with how you communicate the words and the timing of the words and the exact words. Do you know the verse I'm talking about, Allison? All right, maybe she'll.
Not right off the bat.
Okay, usually she does. But it talks about silver and gold in our words and how we communicate them. Even the words are important, but also the timing is important. And so, you know, think about leaving some of our information in our pocket and just beginning to gradually bring it out and gradually sharing it with people. One, it makes it more interesting. And too much info gets in the way. We lose people when we do that. So think about, one, the slingshot, think about the pocket, And then the third thing, he talks about creating callbacks. And when you are sharing in conversation and someone shares a tidbit, and then later you're able to call it back, what does that communicate? That is a powerful communication skill. Because what happens if, let's say, Sandy shares something as she's talking, and 20 minutes later, we're still in a conversation, and I recall something she says, what does that communicate to Sandy? That she realizes I'm really listening and I care about what she's saying. Secondly, if someone knows that you're picking up on what they're saying, they're going to be more engaged in the conversation because they know you want to hear what they're saying. And then thirdly, it brings more credibility to a conversation. When you align yourself with what someone's saying, or at least engage enough to care and hear people out, you've just suddenly become highly credible in that person's eyes. And that's what we want to do. We want to be credible people, people of integrity, people who truly care about other people. And I guarantee you, if we implement these 6 practices into our conversations, we are going to get great results. We're going to get people responding. And so if we're feeling like, gosh, people aren't responding back to me, it's a reminder to ourselves to go back to this ditch the pitch and revisit these habits and really begin to implement these practices into our daily conversations, whether they're verbal or written. All right, so first, for habit 6, don't rush the story. Let it unfold. Habit number 5, focus the conversation on your customer. All right, we're going to take the next 10 or 15 minutes and we are going to listen to Sandy Thompson. She's going to give just a short product story, and let's see how many of those 6 different practices we can put into practice and let Sandy know just how engaged we are in what she has to share. So Sandy, take it away.
Thanks, Elaine. I was introduced to Juice Plus about 15 years ago at the gym. And we had finished a hard workout that Saturday morning. A friend invited me home to share a shake. And I didn't know what that was, but it sounded good after a hot, sweaty time that I'd had in the gym. So as we got home, I enjoyed the shake. She started telling me about the product. I thought, man, this is a no-brainer. It makes sense. It's just fruits and vegetables. And so I started looking at it and I decided that my family needed that. I come from a cancer family. My father died at the age of 42, 3 months to the day after walking down the aisle. He had his left lung taken out. He had cancer, radiation treatments, chemo treatments. It was a horrific experience. So pushing forward 20 years, lo and behold, I'm 3 months from my 42nd birthday, and I'm diagnosed with cervical cancer after having missed 1 Pap test. And so my journey with cancer began. Had a total hysterectomy. The good news is I did not have to have radiation or chemo, but that was a starting point for me to know, to realize that food, what you put in your body, makes a difference. And so I was well into the Juice Plus by then. I became a team member and I shared. And, when you listen to people and you find out their needs, it's so easy to weave your story in and out. And who do you know, 10 seconds out of a conversation, they're telling you something is wrong with them, something is wrong with their kids, and so on and so forth. Since I've added Juice Plus to my life and business, I want you to remember also that I did this business while I was teaching full time. And I just recently retired 2 years ago. The thing I love about this business is that no matter what stage of life you are in, the last 4 years have been pretty bad in my life. I lost my mother. I lost my mother-in-law. We had a grandbaby, my very first. That was the joy that I went through and kept me going. And I could not really work with my business. But the beautiful news is that I never lost anything. I still maintained a paycheck. I never lost my title. Nobody ever pointed their finger to me and said, Sandy, you should do blah, blah, blah. And I was doing the best I could. And so now I can say this year, things have settled down for me. And I gotta share this. I think the catapult for me this year was when I started working out, walking specifically at the gym. And from that, everybody was masked up. Everybody was terrified. I started smiling. I took my mask off. I can't work out with masks. I took my mask off. I started talking to people. People were, I found out, were starved for communication and for people. And so I started sharing. And so things are opening up, and I feel like my time has come. And now I just have to follow through and get these people that are on my list as excited as I am about what Juice Plus can do for your total body, your total health, your total financial world, your total community that this business brings. There is nothing down. There's no downside to any of this. So join me, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Sandy. Okay, so I'm going to, do you want me to call on someone, or someone want to volunteer? Do I have any volunteers? Oh, look, some people are leaving me. One part, okay. Who's going to jump in and jump in this conversation with her? Give me some tips of what you would, how would you, let's assume you were in that conversation with Sandy. What's some things you would have asked or shared that goes back to either 95% of the time you're listening, obey the one paragraph rule? How would you weave your story into hers? How you wouldn't load the shotgun, but instead leave some things in your pocket or create some callbacks. Well, all right, anybody? Allison, please.
Okay, I would immediately just have I would relate to her because of her father having cancer, since that's my story as well. So I think that I would probably respond with, oh my goodness, Sandy, I just can't imagine how difficult that must have been, you know, and just kind of weaved that into it, because that's something immediately that she, you know, I heard her on, and she could feel that I really understand, since I've walked through that pain, and how that's really a key reason that Juice Plus made sense to me. So I think I would probably start with that if it was me.
I love it. So Allison just utilized two of the practices. One, she used the callback. She referred back to Sandy and her dad. She also would weave her story into that conversation. I can see how easily that would have happened. And you know, the other thing that I just heard in Allison's voice, and I think everyone on here probably did as well, is you didn't hear Allison having anything to do with selling a product. What you heard was empathy. You heard it in her voice. You heard suddenly how she changed her voice to match what she was sharing. You know, people pick up on that, whether they consciously pick up on it or not. So Excellent, excellent, Allison. Who else? Who else wants to weave in some of these tips that we learned today? Karen, you got something?
Am I
Now you're muted.
now
yeah.
I'm muted? Okay, sorry. I got kicked off for some reason. I had to get back on, so sorry about that. I would weave in my personal health story with her. Well, I didn't have cancer. I was still on chemo, and I know the side effects, and I would just pour my heart into her that I completely get what it's like to be sick and to have healing and to be able to share that same healing with others.
I love it. I love it, because when you're sharing your own stories like that, you're going to touch some hearts. That's for sure. Yes, Jelaine.
So I would probably weave in with her about, her dad walking her down the aisle and then losing her dad and having the lung cancer and all of those things that are, really hard. And I can understand that, with you, Sandy, because, my dad, he had the opportunity, we had our 25th wedding anniversary, and my dad got to walk me down the aisle during our 25th because he wasn't around for our original. And then shortly after that, he got the lung cancer and passed away like your dad. So I understand your pain in that. But what I also heard you say is that in all of the bad times that you had, you did not lose your position in the company, and that you didn't lose any status. And, I had to take care of both my mom and my dad. And, things were really rough. Plus I had cancer in the middle of all that. Plus I have my husband who has lots of health issues, and I have never lost my, my level, and the company has always been there and the income has always been there. So I heard you in that too. And so that's an awesome thing that we love about this company.
Thank you, Jelaine. Good points. Okay, let me go back.
Evolution has some added things.
Oh, yes, please share.
So my turn. I think a point of engagement for me would be, I would want to explore a little bit more about the comment that you made about food matters. Because you see, I had esophageal cancer. They took my esophagus out and restructured my stomach. So that's important to me. So why don't you share with me what kind of foods are important to you, to see if maybe that might be applicable to me.
I love it. You took it in another direction that took to me a big step toward Juice Plus, but in a very non-threatening way. Excellent. And asking that question. So he heard, a good point that Sandy made. I love that. So that was again, callback.
Yeah, and then I asked her a question, so now I'm gonna wait for her response. So
Right.
The 95% is on her now.
Yep. So you got two in there. I love it. Okay. Anybody else can take, let me see. How about leaving things in your pocket? What would you, if someone would have had a tendency to say up front that maybe hung back a little bit and shared a little bit later? I know I know that's a stretch, but did anything ring a bell?
Well, Elaine, one of the things I was just thinking about, I probably maybe initially would have done the cancer too, but I think what intrigued me about that, if I was coming at it from somebody new, was, well, what do you mean that you've had this business all the way through it, or that, seasons come and seasons go? I think, especially right now, so many of our businesses are so fragile, and just hearing that, through all this, over these last years, the good and the bad, so what's that business like? Or relating it back to that's been the same thing true for me.
So I think that would fall in that 95%, in that it's just a quick question. And when you ask the questions, it's back on them. Getting in what I've learned, and I think probably most of you on here, is the more I can get that person talking, the higher the chances of them wanting to join me in the business, them wanting to purchase Juice Plus. Because what happens is the more they talk, we know the product and the business we have, it's you can't compare it. So we know it's good for them, but they have to get to the point that they see it and they believe it. And how people get to that point is literally them processing. And what we're doing is helping them process what they need to do and just giving them some direction by asking questions, kind of back what Brenda asked, a great question. Lucian asked a great question. And what that's doing is back to he who asks the questions guides the conversation. Okay, so we are right at 1. Yes, Lucian. Oh, wait, you're on. Okay, good.
So you had asked, what I would leave in my pocket. In this particular instance here, based on what I've seen in the conversation so far, I would definitely leave Juice Plus in my pocket. And what I would kind of focus on is both of our cancer stories and weave those two together. Our dietary issues and food matters and good diet and nutrition and weave that together, because inevitably I find out that most people cannot eat what they're supposed to eat on a daily basis. And then once that gets all established, and that's kind of like the ground-based point, then you can expand from there and start to take a few tidbits out of your pocket.
I think you should have done this training. You're good. That's excellent. I'm
I
gonna
read the
throw,
book.
you were prepared. All right, I'm going to leave you with one thought because I'm interested. So we're getting ideas being flushed out. So I spent a week with somebody who I've really come to love last week. And we talked about, she had bought Juice Plus in the past. And she said over and over again, we buy things that we want good health. We want to do what's right. But every single time I fail when it comes to actually taking the product. So how would you, if we kind of look at what we learned today, maybe some of these apply, maybe they don't. I feel like I did a pretty good job listening to the 95% because I kind of got an idea of who she is, her personality. Let's see, kind of weaved my story in with hers, but at the same time, it's not an issue for me. I'm that kind of compliant kind of personality. So I'm dealing with someone who doesn't have that consistent compliant personality. How would you all, any ideas on leaving things in your pocket, creating callbacks? I kind of, back to Lucian, I've left it kind of in the pocket right now. And I'm thinking through, how do I continue this conversation? Any ideas, any tips? Karen.
You're talking specific to this customer and how you can get her to be consistent. Is that what you're asking?
She's not a customer of mine. She's
not a
Juice Plus
customer.
in the past, has it, loads of it stashed in her house.
Right.
So,
But
I want, without being a shotgun, which I really tried not to do and annoy, I want to somehow begin that process of getting her taking her Juice Plus that she has stashed. So it's not about me getting her as a customer. It's about getting her on board with
taking them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, something that I do personally when people say that, well, I'm not consistent and I've got too much and I don't want to continue, I just say that I refer them back to the benefits that they've expressed to me that they had. Mm-hmm. And I just tell them, I hate for you to lose those benefits because you were doing so well. What I tell most of my customers when they're in that situation is to put it by their toothbrush, because everybody has to brush their teeth in the morning. And they think that's a great idea. And some of them get on board, some don't. But yeah, that's what I generally share.
I know. I know that was a challenging one. So I just kind of let it sit and listen. Mm-hmm. But thinking through I'll let you know how that conversation goes. Yes, Jelaine.
So it's me again. So
Lucian.
Something I might think about is not everybody remembers every day to take their Juice Plus. So how about if we become accountability partners and we give each other permission to call each other once, twice, 3 times a week and see how we're doing. You can keep me on track, I can keep you on track, and we can both benefit from the process.
Love it. Love it. And you know something, that's a great idea. But there was something you started to say that almost kind of knowing this person's personality, kind of going back to focusing on the prospect or the customer. You know what? It's okay if you're not 100% consistent.
Mhm.
50% is better than 0%.
Yep.
And kind of back to Allison spurred me on, which is, you know, I was talking about this is going to be our next study.
Did you write down the book?
Allison spurred me on, read that book and loved it. And here's what it reminded me, that just do it today. Just take it today. What if you just had that attitude? Because in my mind, I'm like, how hard is it? Come on, you know, but that's my personality. But what if we give permission to people to say, I get it. You know, you got this. She's a free spirit, artistic, just kind of person you love being around. So I totally see that. But what if and I can't wait to unpack this book with you guys, because what if we start thinking like people who we don't think like? Now we're really stretching ourselves to a whole nother level of communication and really trying to connect with them without trying to get them to do it the way, you know, pulling it to do it the way I would do it, because they're not going to do it the way I do it, because it's a different personality. We had a long conversation about personalities, and we have exactly the opposite personalities. So it's kind of like, okay, I got to use my thinking cap on how do I, and anyway, okay, enough about that. But you guys keep thinking about it, and I want to, you know, we'll keep batting this around. Okay.
Elaine, can I say one thing that what I say to people a lot too is, you know, I'm a really visual person, and I need, even I've been doing it 18 years, I still have Juice Plus on my counter. So at some point during the morning, I'm going to see it, and it reminds me to do it, because I probably wouldn't if it was not right there.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Okay, guys. Well, our time is up. Thanks for being on the call. I'm excited. We got some great stuff coming. Yay. Can't wait to dig into that book. And I'm going to challenge you guys to print out the little card, and we'll make sure we get it to the point you can print it out, so that